Spider-Man, huh? Finally, I've been dying to see what you can do. Let's go. Just try to break through my armor.
Rhino, I'm gonna take a wild guess that you're strong but dumb.
What's going on, guys? Welcome back to Games to Go, where we review games from all generations, both physical and digital. And today I wanted to take a look back at Spider-Man 2 for the PS2. I haven't played this game in maybe 10-15 years, so I'm definitely interested to go back and see if this game still holds up, because currently it's my favorite Spider-Man game of all time. But anyways, let's dive in and take a closer look at this box art. Alright, as you can see here, we've got the box cover for Spider-Man 2. You can see the logo down the side, Spider-Man right on the front, and they did something that they didn't do in Spider-Man 1, and they put Doc Ock right in the eye. I think it's a nice little touch. Something subtle, but just something I really wanted to see. And then on the side here, you can see it says Spider-Man 2. And then if you flip it over, you can see it says Take New York for a Spin. And it's got a picture of Doc Ock on the back here. From random crime to global threat, the entire city is relying on you to save it. And then it's got a handful of these gameplay squares saying do anything Spider-Man can with breathtaking new moves and amazing combos, battle Doc Ock, bust street crimes, or clash with classic villains. I think this was cool as they didn't spoil the actual villains of the game other than Doc Ock, as on the first Spider-Man they actually listed out the villains, so that's a nice little surprise. Here it says go anywhere, interact with anyone and anything, web swing for the first time from street to rooftop across the entire city, featuring the voices of Tobey Maguire, Kirsten Dunst, and Alfred Molina. Having those voices in the game definitely was a treat, as it really just added to the immersion. But let's open this up. As you can see here, we've got the disc with Doc Ock. I think this is a better looking disc than the first game. Just seeing Doc Ock, his kind of shadow being there is pretty cool. And then we've got the glorious manual, which I miss so much. Again, this is cool. This got a little X-Men Legends promo in the back. That's in color. Again, similar to the first one, the inside is in black and white. And it's got, you know, some credits here from people who worked on the game. Some more gameplay tips, which is definitely needed. The icons being in the game is definitely a help, because there's a lot of icons. If you play the game, there's a lot of icons on the map. The controls, which are necessary because the combos help you out so much. And just the overall description of each section. It's just, these manuals are so nice to look at, because they actually help you, you know, just as much as help sections in the actual game. So I love these manuals. Let me put that back in there. But yeah, there's the box art for the game.
And this is Mary Jane, the girl next door, the girl I love. But love is a tricky thing when you live part of your life behind a mask. Fate handed me amazing powers, and I made a promise to use those powers to help people. With great power comes great responsibility. No matter how much I might wish things were different, there's only one Spider-Man.
One thing this game does really well is adding extra content outside of what happened during the movie. If you've seen Spider-Man 2, then you already know how this goes, but we start off 2 years after the events of Spider-Man 1, as we see Peter struggling to balance his personal life while also fulfilling his duty as Spider-Man. Early on in the game, we meet with Harry and MJ, where immediately you can see how much better Tobey's voice acting is compared to the first. In the first game, he just sounded like he didn't want to be there. In addition, Kirsten Dunst voices MJ and Alfred Molina voices Doc Ock, which definitely helps add to the immersion, even though sometimes MJ doesn't sound like MJ. Regardless, Harry blames Spider-Man for his father's death, and the tension between them continues to grow. I gotta be honest though, I like Black Cat more in this game than I did Mary Jane. Black Cat appears over and over during the course of the story and really helps Peter while he's struggling to find his footing in his personal life. Her sections where you fight crime, race, and fight Shocker definitely kept the game fresh and helped keep the game flowing at a good pace. It was cool to see Quentin Beck, aka Mysterio, given so much screen time, as we have to participate in various games to prove that we're the real Spider-Man, and fight him with his drones in order to save the city. In my opinion, the Mysterio sections were by far the worst part of the game. That's just me though. Just like in the movie, Dr. Octavius' experiment goes wrong and he ends up damaging the inhibitor chip that was protecting his brain. What was great was that the demonstration scene was a playable section, as you had to turn off the generators that were powering the device. This wasn't easy, as the burst from the fusion reactor would fly you across the room if you were hit by them. A small addition, but this really helped elevate the story. As I got deeper into the story, I know they altered some of the events that happened in the movie. Like, I found myself sitting there like, wait, that didn't happen like this, and that didn't happen like that. But it didn't hinder the experience, it was just something I noticed. For example, later on, Doc Ock confronts Kirk Connors, which he never does in the movie. We only see Kirk Connors when Peter is arriving late for his college classes.
Get away from me, you traitor. What? Yeah. He wants to turn me into the police. Is this how you repay my friendship? Yes, of course. That murderous arachnid Spider-Man. He killed Rosie. Destroyed my life's work in an instant. I'll rebuild it, though, and kill him.
Just like in the movie, we get the bank scene where Doc Ock tries to rob a bank to fund his recreation of the fusion machine. The dialogue is a bit off, but it's close enough to make you feel like you're really in the moment. Now here is where I realized how flawed those Doc Ock fights were, but we'll get to that soon enough. Again, what was really cool was after completing a main story mission that was present in the movie, we were sidetracked and went after Shocker, who had escaped from prison during our little competition with Mysterio. The placement of the extra content during the story is timed perfectly, making it feel like you weren't just breezing right through the movie events. A little bit later, we get tossed by Doc Ock in the cafe and then find him on the train just like in the film. Now, I don't know much about game development, but I was impressed how well they did the scene where Doc enters the cafe. For the devs to accurately depict Ock destroying the cafe and throwing Peter around was really impressive, considering the hardware they were working with at the time. Nonetheless, we fight Ock on the train only to pass out and end up at Harry's place where we tell him we have to find MJ. This moment didn't hold any weight like the movie, but it was nice to see this shown in video game form. This leads us to the final confrontation with Ock at the abandoned building on the waterfront, which served as the most frustrating fight of the entire game. Story-wise, it stayed true to the movie and saw Ock sacrifice himself to undo the mess he had caused and finally set things right. As we swing off into the distance after kissing MJ, I was satisfied with how the story was told in the game and thought they did a solid job of recapping the events while straying off the path just enough to keep you intrigued in regards to what would come next. Now, let's move on to the gameplay. The gameplay is where this game excels. It's leaps and bounds above any previous Spider-Man game before it, and I think this is the main reason why I love this game in the first place. First, let's start off with the web swinging. The web swinging in this game is so fast and fluid you're damn near flying across the entire map, making all the time trials and time missions a cakewalk. What's even better is that when you use the webs, you actually have to stick to something instead of just webbing up into the sky like in the original Spider-Man. If you didn't have a building or an object to web on, then Spider-Man would just jump up in the air and you weren't going anywhere. These small attention to details made a huge difference. The open world concept that we saw signs of in prior games was finally realized in this title, as you could go anywhere across New York City and it really felt like you could stop crime anywhere at any time. There was always plenty to do outside of the main story missions, and it was never a chore to reach these places since the web swinging was so good. All of these things to do in the world was just the icing on the cake. The mini-games and crimes are really what make this game addicting. To start off with, delivering pizzas is one of the funnest mini-games in video game history. It's so simple, but yet challenges you as the placement of each delivery gets further away and requires faster web swinging as you finish each pizza level. I spent hours just completing each level, and I can only pray that we get to see this minigame in a future Spider-Man title because it's just that good. The trials that this game had were fun, as they had you completing certain objectives that would reward you with skill points that would allow you to buy new abilities and help you in traversal and combat. I would say out of all the aspects in this game, these little challenges had the least replayability, but they were still pretty fun. As you would swing around the city, there were always citizens that needed help. These were represented by green icons that were all over the map. Once you approached a person, they would report the crime and then you would have to stop it. What's so great is that there was a variety of crimes that would happen and you weren't just doing the same crime over and over again. Yeah, like, most of them consisted of beating up thugs, but who doesn't like to do that? Other activities that people would have you take on is like taking injured people to the hospital, catching balloons that little kids had lost, and saving construction workers from falling off the buildings. When you combine all the mini games on top of the story missions, there is always something to do, so I was never bored during my playthrough. Now the actual combat itself is really fun. Fighting the thugs and bosses just felt like I really was Spider-Man, as you could buy combos from the comic book shops located around the city to unlock new moves to use against your enemies. Once you realize which combos to perform on what enemies, the combat just opened up, as you could perform a variety of different moves depending on the situation. And I'm very happy to say that the boss fights in this game were nowhere near as hard as they were in Spider-Man 1. But there were still two situations that were a huge pain. First, the Mysterio sections after completing the arena games were just terrible. Like, why did we have to swing across the city and then across the river only to web up onto these UFO beacon objects? It's like the devs wanted us to play on the Statue of Liberty, so they just threw this together so we would be able to play over in that area. When we actually get there, it was a huge pain to try and get high enough in the air to swing over to each orb and destroy those so we could eliminate the main thing in the middle. To make matters worse, if you were too slow, the orbs would just regenerate, forcing you to destroy them all over again. I just thought this whole section was unnecessary and could have just been done on the ground, but I do admire the vision regarding the level creation. I just think the execution could have been done a lot better. Now let's move on to these boss fights, especially the Doc Ock fights. I went into this game thinking he was going to be semi-difficult, but nah, this man was just as hard as Green Goblin. Each time you fight him, the game tells you to web up his tentacles when he attacks to pin them down so you can run off some combos. What makes this difficult is that he performs a whole bunch of different moves, so even when you use your webs, they may not even stick to the arms. To make matters worse, you have to web up each individual tentacle. You can't just web up all the arms together, making the whole process even more tedious. Let's just say you web up an arm or two. You then had to web up the other arms fast enough so that those arms would stay down before the other arms would break free from the webbing, and you'd have to repeat the whole process over again. The way I was able to defeat this man was by waiting for him to perform specific moves with the arms that would put them close to the ground. So when I was using the webs, they would make the arms stick to the ground immediately. If you tried webbing the arms while Ock was in the air, it was almost impossible to tie them all up. On the surface, he isn't a hard boss, it's just the mechanics of how to defeat him could have been done so much better. If I had to choose a favorite boss, it would probably be Shocker, as his fights weren't annoying but challenging enough to force you to pay attention and figure out how to defeat him. His fights were even more fun because we had Black Cat with us, helping us during the battle. Finally, there's one more thing that I gotta mention. There's this part where you have to fight these thugs in giant green machines alongside Black Cat. That combat section was just as hard now as it was when I was a kid. You have like 4 or 5 of these giant machines you gotta take out that have a really high defense. And to make matters worse, there's a bunch of normal thugs shooting at you while you fight the machines. This section took me a minute to get through, as I have no idea how I beat that part as a kid. Overall, this game still holds up and is a fantastic Spider-Man experience. Even with the outdated graphics and some annoying gameplay segments, this title is still a blast to play. With all that being said, I'm going to give this game an 8 out of 10. Returning back to this game so many years later made me realize that even though this game is good, nostalgia really can blind you to some of the issues that are apparent in some of these older games. Regardless, if you haven't played this game, I would definitely recommend this, just for the pizza minigame alone, and then you have the actual story on top of that. But now that I finished this playthrough, I think I can confidently say that this is no longer my favorite Spider-Man game. It's still great, but after playing Spider-Man 2018, there's no way I can put that above this game. What did you think about Spider-Man 2 for the PS2? Did you play this game when you were a kid? And if you did, do you still think it holds up? Let me know that and more in the comment section below. And if you enjoyed the video, feel free to drop a like or subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one.